Hello, everybody, and good morning. Welcome to this MicroNet webinar. Before we actually start with the real webinar, I would like to give you some practical information. My name is Maria Kelo. I'm the Director of Institutional Development at the European University Association, EUA, in Brussels. You can see just a couple of guiding points on the platform. So you have two specific areas or ways in which you can interact with the speakers and with each other. So you have the chat button on the right, top right-hand corner, and there you can post a greeting or a technical question you have or anything of the sorts, or add a comment. In the Q&A, we'd like you to post your questions for the speakers. So post them in the Q&A, and there you can also upvote the approved questions and see if there are any written responses to those questions. So do check that out as well. So that is, I think, all for the technicalities. We have already 260 participants who have joined us, so that's brilliant. Thank you for your interest. And now I think I can hand over to Emma for the beginning of the webinar, actually.
Thank you, Maria. Well, welcome everyone to our webinar today from the MicroNet project, which is being hosted by the EUA, and it's called Navigating Microcredentials, Institutional, National and European Perspectives. As Maria said, my name is Emma Francis, and I am part of the MicroCred project here in Ireland, based in the Irish University Association. So we have a really interesting programme today with sessions looking at the national, the institutional experiences from both Finland and Ireland, with case studies on the development and the implementation of the Irish portal for microcredentials, together with some really interesting inputs from our business and community sectors as well. So MicroNet itself is an Erasmus project that is led by the Irish Universities Association, together with our European University Alliance members, the UNIC and the ECIU, together with the EUA and QQI in Ireland. So the focus is on the promotion of the awareness and understanding of microcredentials across our members assembled and the greater European area as well. So really a look at the sharing of good policy and practice approaches to quality assurance for microcredentials using the Bologna tools, and the development and growth of really the understanding and support for microcredential learner mobility and pathways right across the EHEA. So this, of course, would include the use of Bologna tools to support the access to and the portability, mobility and stacking of microcredentials. So that's a very brief overview of our work, and I'll hand back over to Maria now for the rest of our session this morning. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Emma. So I wanted to give you a very quick overview of what is, let's say, the European framework for microcredentials. There is not a really agreed definition of what a microcredential is. We agree that it is a certified small volume of learning. So that both says quite a bit and doesn't. It can be offered by, of course, different entities, higher education institutions, or any other entity, and they can or maybe are not recognized by higher education institutions. But what is specific, that it's just not any old module that we would like to be called microcredential, but really gives the learner a specific knowledge, skills and competencies. So it's kind of a defined unit of learning that has its own learning outcomes and own purpose as a self-standing unit. The idea is that the microcredentials would be owned by the learner and would be portable and maybe combined into larger credentials, or maybe even to qualifications. So we talk about stackability of microcredentials in that context. They can be earned without, before, during, as part of, and after higher education degree programs. So that's the idea, that they are really part of what could be considered like lifelong learning. So very much so. Let me see if I can move on. There is no trademark for the word microcredentials, so anybody can call what they provide as a microcredential, which means that you don't always know what you're getting if something is called microcredentials. On the other hand, many things that are microcredentials in our understanding might be called something else. In the European policy context, the European higher education area context, so the Bologna process, the first mention of micro-credentials was in the Bologna process Rome ministerial communique in 2020. And since then, it has really been a key topic in many of the BFUG working groups. So the Bologna process working groups for quality assurance, for recognition, for credits, teaching and learning, social dimensions. So it really permeates all the different areas of the work of the Bologna process. And the idea is that we can really integrate those micro-credentials into the existing framework and use the existing tools for quality assurance, recognition, and so on to micro-credentials as well as to any other learning provision. And also in the last week's Tirana Ministerial Conference, the communique then mentions micro-credentials as part of the commitment to foster flexible learning paths. It's also part of the European Union policy framework. And this is an interesting thing because this is really an area where there is close collaboration between the directorates in charge of education and that one in charge of employment. So for the European Commission, there's really a very strong employability element in their policies for micro-credentials. When we talk about different stakeholders in the European context about micro-credentials, we see that the policymakers are really interested in them as a way to address the need for upskilling and reskilling and to provide flexible and inclusive learning paths, which is also in many contexts a policy priority. For institutions, there's a very mixed package of concerns and interest areas. It is a way to provide targeted and specialized training, also reach out to different students that would not normally be part of your educational outreach, increase visibility and reputation of the institutions, and perhaps even support recruitment also from abroad that we have heard sometimes. And it's a way to demonstrate that they respond to the needs of the labor market and of the students. And also, it's been often said that this is a good way to experiment both new technologies, new pedagogies, and also new partnerships, both within the country, perhaps with companies or other such, and also outside. With other countries. So, for example, European University Alliances often mention that this is for them a good testing ground to put together a micro-credential rather than immediately go for a launch of a joint program, which is much more complex usually. For learners, it can be an entry mechanism to a degree program, also a way to acquire interdisciplinary knowledge. So perhaps you take a micro-credential in the field that is different from your main study field. It allows for more flexibility and access to wider range of providers also abroad. And we don't really know a lot about the employer's perspective. There, the response is always a little bit lower when we have a survey. It's harder to reach them, but apparently it makes it easier for them to understand in a clear way what skills and competencies and knowledge the applicant or their workforce has, and they can also use that for the on-the-job training. So also for something that they might have been provided themselves, and now there is a way to give a credential for that. So I think that's perhaps what I have time for. And I think the point from the European perspective is that this is a complementary measure. It's not the replacement of other forms of education. It has a high potential to support really greater access to higher education and response to the evolving and faster need to regain new skills and upskill. But we also need to have some indicators of success to understand whether all those big expectations that we have on micro-credentials that are very varied are actually met. So that was a very quick run through from my side. And then I would like to pass on back to Emma for chairing the next session, please.
Thank you, Maria. So we're really pleased to have two very distinguished speakers joining us from both Ireland and Finland today, who are going to share their insights and their experiences into this realm of micro-credentials. So firstly, from Ireland, we have Mags Arnold. Mags is the microcredit project lead from University College Cork and is a MicroNet partner through the UNIC University Alliance. So UCC is one of the founding partners of the Alliance, the European University of Cities in Post-Industrial Transition. This is an alliance of 10 universities across Europe who work with their cities in harmony and with each other to tackle these urban challenges and develop shared sustainable futures. So from Finland as well, we have Minna Hilos from Haga-Helia University of Applied Sciences. Haga-Helia is a really strongly business-oriented university of applied sciences in Finland that have a focus on cooperation, entrepreneurship, innovation and internationality. So both Mags and Minna will introduce their role and the work that they've done to date in the field of microcredentials in Ireland and Finland respectively, why their institutions believe microcredentials are important, and also the different approaches to developing and implementing these courses. So we'll learn a little on their target audiences, the various models attached, and highlighting some of the key results to date. So this will, I hope, and interestingly for our audience, maybe pick up on the successes and challenges they've faced along the way, and also with a look ahead to the future and what are their expectations. So we're looking forward to an insightful session, a lively discussion as well afterwards on this really interesting topic. So we'll start by welcoming our first speaker today, Mags. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of often busy time of year to listen to us discuss microcredentials. So what we like to do in Cork is I'm going to have a look through what we did and how and where it's successful and things that we would and would not do as well. So one of the wonderful things about us all coming together from across Europe is to share those findings, share what we've done, share those successes and how to make microcredentials better and a long-lasting offering. So we had a look at what we had in the university, what our offerings were. We took those and put them on their head really, but retained certain factors. So we're looking at being a responsive and agile piece of learning. We moved our program turnaround from an average of 18 months for a new program to a new microcredential becoming up and running in 12 weeks. We moved our system online to ensure that the curriculum management retains the same level of rigor, but makes it easier for staff to do. And also building in RPL to all of our entry requirements for any microcredential. This allows equivalence for learners to access those microcredentials, both for upskilling and reskilling. So where we have perhaps an honours degree as a learning requirement, we have an equivalent and an associated piece of evidence with that. So perhaps 5 years professional experience is suitable as an RPL version of the entry requirement. And they are all set by the university so that we can ensure we are setting the students up for success on their courses. It's also important to decide where your university needs to draw the line, because we have seen in the proliferation of microcredentials across Europe and wider that there are some pieces that wouldn't align to our values. What do we stand firm on? What do we want to retain as a university? So our quality assurance for microcredentials in UCC follows the exact same process as any other offering. To get to that 12 weeks of turnaround, we just took off the wait times in between to ensure a lean process, but retain those standards. Everything is mapped using Bologna tools, so those ECTS are allocated in exactly the same way as they would be for a full program as they are for a microcredential. Our external examiners are also vital across our microcredentials. We have 1,506 students going to exam boards over this summer period. So they go to review at local and university level with comments from the externs at both stages to ensure that rigor stays in place. And to support those students have supports in the system, supports around them, access to resources, and those students give feedback throughout the process. We have a wide range of micro-credentials across UCC. We have dance, sustainability, EDI, some very business-orientated pieces. But we also have included some micro-credentials that hold to the UCC ethos. So we are building up micro-credentials to support people with an intellectual disability and allowing them access to higher education too, as well as producing very scientific pieces such as our fundamentals of neuroanatomy, which was developed with the company Stryker. And then how have we done this? Well, with all honesty, without the input from the HCI funding as part of the National Microcreds project, we would have not have been able to roll out micro-credentials in the way that we have in UCC. So that HCI money has gone to support our students, our creators, and upgrade our systems. The biggest hurdles that we have had to overcome in UCC to create micro-credentials have not been the enthusiasm and innovation of our staff. It's the system is built for full programs. We had pieces that were built for January or September starts and nothing in between. We had an admission system that's built for full programs, which it's sensible to ask for a full education response from a learner when we're asking them to register for a full program or a PhD. But when you're registering for 5 credits, we don't need to know your school leaving cert. The digital credentialing that we're offering in UCC is separate from Europass, and it's something we hope to perhaps come back to in the future. In terms of what we're offering to support our students, it's something that you need to consider when you're thinking about offering micro-credentials is what level of student do they become as part of your system? Our students, our learners under microcreds are registered with the university and become members of that university. So in doing that, they have a full range of access to supports, and all of those supports are based on ensuring their academic achievement. So one of the pieces that you can see here up on my slide is access to our skills centre. And the skills centre was built and designed to offer small additional chunks of learning that are outside the curriculum, so that you can take a small course in referencing, academic writing, presenting skills, but they are very separate from your main curriculum. And we found that our students actually like the fact that this is separate, it doesn't appear on their transcript, that they access these supports so that they can access asynchronous pieces of learning, pieces that we're offering on Saturdays and in the evenings to help learners through the system. And I would say that our students that come through the microcreds process, they do see themselves as consumers, and they will have high expectations, but they are also engaged and wonderfully active students that ask questions of our staff. They want our staff to work with them to resolve workplace issues. They are really an enjoyable way to come back to education and see how education can be part of their life again. We have learners that our longest returner has a gap of 30 years since they were part of the education system, and they have now come away from the micro-credentials and are registered for full masters. As mentioned earlier, micro-credentials offer the opportunity to innovate in your teaching and learning. We have inclusive dance, we have special operations medicine that allow learners to build a pathway, offer that opportunity within a small piece of learning to truly innovate. We would not have made this progress without our enterprise partners. They allow the university when we're looking to upskill and reskill our workforce, we have to ensure that we're offering what the workplace needs. And that's why in UCC, we are at a point of 60% of our micro-credentials are co-designed with an industry partner to ensure that workplace learning. And those partnerships have benefits for both of us. Many of our micro-credential partners are providing guest lectures on our undergraduate programs. One company has even provided placements for one of our undergrad programs. And this allows that company to invest in their people in the short term and in the long term, allowing for that succession planning. And the way the world is at the moment, it also allows you to retain your staff, because instead of paying perhaps upfront for a larger program such as a certificate or diploma, they can invest in their staff on an annual basis, perhaps paying for one micro-credential this year and another next. So it really does speak to that piece of how we look after our staff, how we retain our staff. So where are we going next? So what we're doing in UCC is integrating those micro-credentials into our systems. So something I'm working on at the moment, micro-credentials, instead of being a parallel process, is going to be embedded into our curriculum management system. So we're even now getting rid of the online form. It's all part of our university system. We're seeking funding wherever we can to ensure that micro-credentials are accessible to all, including a current government fee subsidy scheme that's released 9.7 million into the university system to fund micro-credentials. And one of the values that I said at my interview, and I still hold dear to, that the micro-credentials that we offer today must retain that value beyond the lifespan of any project, that what we're offering people is skills for today, but credentials that last them and add value to their CV over time. So thank you for your time, and I will pass on to my colleagues.
Thank you so much, Mags, and thanks for that overview of the great work that's underway at UCC. We have several questions in. I might pose one to you, Mags, and then we will move on then to our next speaker and we can have a fuller discussion then. We have a question from Alexander. Would you also consider micro-credentials for vocational training activities?
So we do have pieces that have very regulatory responses. We do have micro-credentials that in Ireland are from level 6 to level 9. So some of the pieces we have down at level 6 are quite procedural and learning how to use machines. We have one that we have on offer at the moment that's based on ice cream, and that's manufacture and creation. So it's very food science based, but it also is a real workplace skill. So showing people how to do things carefully, safely, but maintaining that artisanal piece that we see that's often in the case in agri-food in Ireland.
That's great, Max. Well, thank you very much. I would now introduce our next speaker, Mina Hilos from Hagahelia University of Applied Sciences. Thank you very much, Mega.
Thank you, and hello to everybody. I have a very practical approach in my presentation, so I'm basically telling a little bit what we are doing right now. And first of all, I would like to say a few words about my university. We are a University of Applied Sciences, educate professionals for business, services and technology. We offer 5 kinds of degrees in business, information technology, hospitality and tourism, sports, as well as journalism. So 5 degrees, and we also have a professional teacher school. So we teach teachers. It's a vocational teacher school, which means that we have strong expertise in the area of pedagogics. And this has to do with micro-credentials in that way that we very closely work with the employers, with the companies also, what comes to pedagogics, what kind of pedagogics are suitable for business learners, for instance. Research in our university is typically carried out in partnership with small and medium-sized enterprises. And we are a member of one of these European university alliances. Ours is called Ulysseus. We operate here in Helsinki in the metropolitan area. We have 5 campuses, a little bit over 11,000 students, over 1,000 international degree students, and some 750 employees, of which 420 are faculty members. What I would particularly like to point out is that we work a lot with corporate partners. We have a so-called partnership program, roughly plus minus 100 partners each year. And this is one of the cornerstones in our strategy and how we offer micro-credentials to the business learners, and also to the learners that we have more from the Open University side. This is just quickly the research areas. So pedagogy, obviously, entrepreneurship and business development, sales development and digitalization, service development and design. But more closely back to micro-credentials. So I have divided, in a sense, our approach to micro-credentials to 2. One is a commercial approach, and Haaga-Helia has a long tradition in providing short and longer courses to different business professionals, and we offer them as commercial courses. So it's a business to us. So it's a source of income to the university. And micro-credentials work very well in providing a way to upskill employees' skills quickly, efficiently, ensuring that they have the latest knowledge and skills to stay competitive. And we see that there are many features in business life together today that really create demand for upskilling and reskilling employees. There is the green transition, artificial intelligence, sustainability, new topics that are familiar to all of us, and that companies are a little bit struggling with how they are upskilling and reskilling their employees so that they would have the competencies to meet the challenges and needs of these new emerging areas. But this business approach or commercial approach demands a very close cooperation with the local business community. And we have been working with the companies in the Helsinki metropolitan area by creating a so-called partner program. And I think it has been quite successful. And the idea behind the partner program is actually that the companies pay to us. So we offer them so-called packages, SM and L, small, medium and large. And the packages offer certain services for the company. And why the companies want to pay for us to become a partner is that primarily they are interested in our students. I think we all in are suffering from a labor shortage, and the companies, they really are interested to getting to know our degree students as potential source of labor. They want to promote their brand. Maybe they like to have a classroom devoted to their brand and so on. So primarily we often have a contact or base a contact with them regarding their brand building and their interest in future labor. And when we have established the contact, we offer them different services. And one of the services is that we can build education for them in the form of micro-credentials. So as of Monday today, actually, I had a look that we had 81 partner companies. And the partnership works like that we really maintain an ongoing discussion with our partners. So we have a good insight into their needs, their evolving needs. For instance, sustainability has been an area where they have needed recently upskilling. We also seek feedback from these companies, how they have liked our trainees. We want to know if we are on the right track. We use them often for polls or surveys. Each year, annually, we ask them what kind of needs they might have for upskilling their labor. And they are very willing to cooperate in these issues. So they are really interested in this cooperation. We also organize different events for them so that they can also mingle and network with each other. So they really feel that they are partners of our university. And the MCs that we offer to them, they can be tailored. So they can be tailored courses or programs. It can be coaching, or it can be like small, tiny course type of offerings. But they are always, in a sense, planned so that they suit the individual needs of the businesses and organizations that we are working with. The other approach, which is more like an inclusive approach, is the open university approach. These are not any kind of official names of the approaches, but mainly just for you to give a picture how we work with MCs. So the first one was the commercial one, where we really try to also produce an income for my university. And this one is more like inclusive learning paths, inclusive learning possibilities. There, the variance is really big. They can be really, really short, like one afternoon, one morning, or it can be a larger entity, a kind of a learning package maybe of 30 ECTSs. Currently, our ministry is working with guidelines for micro-credentials. I'm myself a part of that group. Päivi Bosket, who is a presenter later, will tell more about the national framework, but we are still piloting it. And actually in the national framework, it's defined so that the micro-credentials would be from 1 to 59 ECTSs, but currently we offer also very, very short ones. We offer virtual contact or blended mode, so all different teaching modes are used. And we use also not only our own faculty, but faculty also from our partner schools. And the course fees are very moderate, so this is like the non-expensive part of the offering. Of course, we also develop micro-credentials in cooperation with other national universities, and also in the framework of our own European university. And there are a lot of different projects around micro-credentials right now, and the ministry has also launched funding to develop the concept of micro-credentials. In the future, we anticipate that we will have more commercial offering as a source of income. The idea of stackability is important, so that the student, whether a business learner or an individual learner, can really build up different entities, different diplomas in the future. And we will also use the digital service platform that we are actually developing with all the Finnish universities together. It's actually funded by the RFFF money, so it will be like a national digital platform from which also MCs can be offered. I think I have used my time, but maybe I just very briefly give some examples of the offering. So we have like larger entities, 15 ECDs, just some examples: Social Media Pro, the Starting Entrepreneurs Toolkit, and then we have a variety of topics. For instance, basics of sustainability reporting has really been a star product, very, very popular amongst the business customers. So we really cover a variety of areas, of course, tied to the topics that are present in our degree offering, but also something that we develop particularly for the companies. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mina. That was a really interesting talk. We have a variety of questions coming in. I'll pose the first one to Mina. So how is the partner program organised within your institution? Rowan has asked, do you have specific account managers that stay in touch with the partners and really manage that relationship?
So how we established and managed the relationships? I would say that maybe one feature in the partner program is that it's often our alumni who graduate from here, and they obviously work in various businesses, or they have their own businesses. So we often approach our alumni. But maybe one important thing is that you have to reach the management level of the company, so that you really talk to those people who, in a sense, have the power to decide, for instance, of their personal budget, their education budget, so that you talk to the right people. I think that's one of the key features. But very often we start with the alumni, and then the relationship evolves and becomes deeper during the time. With the plus minus 100 companies, some of the partnerships obviously are deeper. We work more with them. With some, we do less things. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I have a question from Berta that I'll pose to both of you. I think you've both obviously raised the impact of enterprise engagement with the micro-credentials that you develop, but you've also touched on the sort of wider societal and community aspects as well. So Berta is interested in learning, how can you develop this link with community partners that are sensitive to the many global challenges and economic challenges as well? And are they an opportunity to strengthen community engagement around your institutions?
So if I begin. So just to begin with, well, Cork is a UNESCO learning city, so that's something we hold dear, and ensuring that we bring in those community partners to be part of the learning within UCC. So how we can do that is we're looking to offer access to those micro-credentials for community partners, and also supporting learners whilst they're in with us to access courses that perhaps previously they would not be able to. So we have a lot of community groups at the moment accessing both our sustainability offerings and our inclusion pieces for people with intellectual disabilities, and our inclusive dance piece.
Thanks, Max.
Yeah, well, I think one big question is, for instance, those groups that are, in a sense, marginalized from the labor market, how to reach them. And one of the issues we have been talking a lot about is study counseling, that how do we reach those individuals, for instance, who are out of the labor market and are searching for measures to upskill their competencies. And I think the only way for this is to set up a proper counseling kind of a function in a university with a low threshold to take contact with the university, and kind of professional counselors giving advice to the potential learner that what kind of opportunities there would be on the inclusive learning path, the non-expensive offering. So I think study counseling is actually in a key role what comes to reaching the marginalized groups and the other parts of the community who might not be, everybody obviously is not employed by business companies. So I think that's one way to do it.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mina. We might take one more question and then conclude our session. And one very popular question that has come through the chat is, how do you both certify your micro-credentials? Do you use open badges, for example, or how does that look specifically in your institution?
So for us, our students receive the same academic transcript that they would receive for any other program, but we're also finding that it's quite popular to receive a digital credential, and that's something, so people can have something that's easier to put on their CV. Some of the digital credentialing products out there allow you to have all of the information that you would have to meet the EU recommendations, so that's important. But it also gives the employer that reassurance that this is something that is certified by the university and not just a PDF somebody's made on their own computer.
Thanks.
Yes, my answer is similar. It's the regular system transcripts. For certain larger entities, we give diplomas. They are still on paper, but we are aiming at digital credentials.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mina. Well, I think that concludes our time for this session. Thank you very much to our two speakers, Mags and Mina. It was very interesting insights. And thank you as well to participants for their very insightful questions. I'll pass back over now to our chair, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I hand now to Emma. To Nora, who chairs the next two sessions. So that's all from me.
Thank you, Maria, and good morning, everyone. My name is Nora Trench-Bowles. I work for the Irish Universities Association as Head of Lifelong Learning, Skills and Quality, and I'm delighted to be chairing the next session with my dear colleague, David Corskadden, who is the communications manager for the MicroCred project that you've been hearing something about, which is based here in the Irish Universities Association. David will talk to us this morning about the recent experience of building the microcreds.ie platform. No mean feat, and there are certainly lots of lessons learned, I'm sure, that David will be sharing with us here today. So David's presentation will be about 10 minutes. We can always squeeze in a couple of questions from participants if you have some, so please do put any questions you have into the Q&A function. So without further ado, over to you, David, please.
Thanks very much, Nora. So as Nora mentioned, I'm going to be speaking about the microcredentials project, and in particular about the development of our national microcredentials platform, microcreds.ie. And throughout my presentation, I'll kind of share some insights on how we've really tried to embed microcredentials into the kind of natural higher education ecosystem here in Ireland, and how we're using microcreds.ie and our kind of different promotional activities to really drive awareness of microcredentials as an upskilling and reskilling tool here in Ireland. So I suppose to begin, we kind of look at the microcreds project as a whole. We have four key strands of work that we're working through over the course of our project. The main one that I'm going to look at today is strand 3, which is the development of a centralized national platform for microcredentials. But really, in essence, each strand of our work feeds into microcreds.ie and our engagement with both learners and enterprise. If it wasn't for our national framework for microcredentials, we wouldn't have that kind of streamlined messaging across our 7 partner universities around what is a microcredential. The same with our microcreds Innovate activities. Without that engagement with enterprise around actually exploring the needs of enterprise, exploring the needs of learners, we wouldn't have been able to develop a kind of national platform that is really trying to cut through some of the noise in the educational sector here in Ireland. I suppose the first stage of our development of microcreds.ie was really getting behind and understanding who are we developing microcredentials for and who are we ultimately developing microcreds.ie for. Our initial focus was really looking at the difference between the traditional learners in our universities and the more kind of agile upskilling microcredential learners. How do they differ? How do they differ in terms of their engagement with universities? How do they engage differently with actual formal education? We're working with an awful lot of people who might be out of formal education for 5 to 10 years. How do they re-emerge into kind of a formal education setting? Once we had a grasp on that, we then started to look at what does enterprise need from upskilling opportunities and microcredentials. Through our funding with the Human Capital Initiative Pillar 3, we have a strong mandate to work with enterprise to address critical skills needs here in Ireland. So we really wanted to understand what does enterprise need when they're looking for upskilling opportunities and when they're looking for engagement activities with universities. So in 2021, we commissioned the Genesis report, which really kind of did a deep dive into this. And in the later sessions around enterprise involvement, you'll hear a bit more about the work that we're doing in microcreds with our enterprise advisory board. But when it came to developing microcreds.ie, it was really important for us to put the end users at really the forefront of the development. So we engaged with potential learners, with enterprise around each stage of the build. So from the discovery, the initial scoping, right through to the design, the development, the testing, we had the end user at the center of all of the decisions that we were making, which for anyone who comes from a higher education setting, you can understand the kind of challenges that faced of trying to break down the kind of institutional norms and produce a product that really kind of worked for the end user. And I'll speak a bit more about that in my next slides. But obviously, once we developed the website, our kind of engagement with users and our user experience journey didn't end. The website is kind of a live, living website that we're continuing to develop and enhance, which towards the end of my presentation, I'll give you a quick insight into some of the kind of newer work that we're doing around engaging with the lifelong learning journey here in Ireland. In terms of our users, I think it's important just to kind of highlight who we kind of developed microcreds.ie for. So we have two distinct users. So there's the individual learners who are aged between 25 and up to 55, 60. They're really looking at lifelong learning opportunities to upskill, to reskill themselves, to possibly change careers, or they're also people who are looking at just exploring personal interests as well. Then we're also looking at enterprise, and in particular, we do an awful lot of our engagement with the kind of senior management. So the CEOs, the managing directors, those people in enterprise who have a clear mandate for upskilling and reskilling their employees. So we've done an awful lot of work with enterprise to understand how can their employees meaningfully engage in lifelong learning with the understanding that they have their professional commitments in the organization, but then also personal commitments outside. So we've really tried to keep these two distinct learners at the kind of forefront of developing microcreds.ie, but also the courses that we're developing and how we actually display them and promote them on the website. In terms of our kind of early insights from our research and our engagement with these two key stakeholders, there was a number of kind of observations that we came to and that we really tried to embed in microcreds.ie. From the kind of engagement channels, it's a very messy ecosystem here in Ireland. It can be very confusing for individual learners or for enterprise to understand where to go for information. So the idea of microcreds.ie was to create a centralized one-stop shop for people to come find out information about micro-credentials from our 7 partner universities instead of having to go to 7 individual university websites. On the more practical side, when we were looking at our course pages, we really kind of explored the kind of key information that users were going to look for. So what might surprise people is some of the information that came up at the top was really the delivery mode. How is it offered? Can people fit it into their daily lives? There was a strong preference for fully online or blended, where there's an added benefit of it being blended. The duration and the time commitment was really important for people, as well as the pricing. And the topic or the title of the course was really important. By developing microcreds.ie, we tried to really push the topics and the course content at the forefront to help people find the course that will help them to address their skills needs. Stacking was very important for learners and was always viewed favorably as the option to stack micro-credentials together. But it's important to bear in mind as well, an awful lot of our users are just looking at using micro-credentials as a once-off offering. So that stacking, while it's viewed favorably, it isn't the most important thing for them. One of the strongest things that came across from all of our research was language. Higher education institutions like to speak in an awful lot of jargon that isn't really familiar to kind of the general public, to learners. So what we've tried to do through our work with microcreds.ie is to really strip out an awful lot of the institutional language and really speak in a clear, concise way that both enterprise and learners can understand. This is just a quick screenshot of an example of one of the courses that we have on microcreds.ie. I'd highly recommend to go have a look at microcreds.ie and explore the site as a whole. But from this screenshot, you'll see where we've really tried to pull that kind of tangible, practical information that I mentioned on the last slide out to the forefront, so that while users are in their research stage of their recruitment journey, they're able to compare and contrast courses and really find the one that suits their needs. Microcreds.ie, as Nora mentioned, was a labour of love. It kind of launched in its beta version in March 23. At that stage, we were really kind of onboarding our 7 partner universities. We were uploading the course content, working through bugs. And then it was formally launched in July 2023. It was launched by our then Minister for Further and Higher Education, now Taoiseach, Simon Harris, and also by our Minister for Enterprise, Simon Coveney. And I think the fact that both our Higher Education Minister and our Enterprise Minister came together to launch this new tool for the public, I think it shows the impact and that kind of collaboration between higher education and enterprise and the kind of delivery of this offering. Since our launch, we continue to really enhance the user experience. We're really trying to make it as easy as possible for users to find the right course and to use the platform and ultimately engage with our partner universities in enrolling on a course. But we've also done an extensive amount of work around the kind of promotion of micro-credentials. Just to give a kind of brief overview of how we're trying to really embed micro-credentials into our kind of natural education ecosystem here. We've really taken kind of a through-the-line marketing approach where we're focusing on driving awareness of micro-credentials and a kind of clear understanding of what micro-credentials are, the credibility of micro-credentials, and really kind of reassuring people that the skills that they will develop are relevant to the work that they're doing, and also the kind of value add of micro-credentials. We do this at a national level here in the Irish Universities Association, but then each of our 7 universities take their own unique approach to promoting their micro-credentials at a local level, where they're getting into the kind of nitty-gritty of promoting the individual courses. Our brand identity, as you'll see on the next slide, is very strong. It does stand out from the kind of traditional university marketing that we see here in Ireland, and that was important for us to really kind of merge into kind of very crowded market and have a unique identity and really drive interest and awareness of micro-credentials as an upskilling and reskilling opportunity. Some of our more recent work in microcreds.ie is really trying to understand the ideal learner journey. We did some work earlier last year with Pickle Jar Communications, where we really kind of got under the hood of the kind of ideal learner journey for micro-credential learners here in Ireland. And what we're trying to do now is to embed some of the recommendations and the kind of streamlining processes both at microcreds.ie and at our university level, which Mags would have spoke about, kind of trying to streamline application processes, the development of micro-credentials, and the naming conventions as well. My final slide, because I'm aware I'm going slightly over time, are just some key insights that I wanted to share today. If you're embarking on kind of a similar project to what we've done, is to really not to lose sight of the end user and their needs, to keep that at the forefront. Probably my most important bit of advice was to really speak the same language as your end users or your learners. That really encourages them to kind of engage with the process of lifelong learning. Important thing is to not to front load all of the information at the beginning of their recruitment journey, to really give users the information at the time that they need it and when they'll actually use it. And really to kind of meet users or learners where they are. Don't expect them to come to you. So that's why we've really embarked on this kind of extensive promotional campaign to really kind of meet users where they are on social media during their commutes to and from work, and start to kind of embed that narrative of upskilling and the kind of benefits of micro-credentials. I will finish there now. I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat, or my contact details are on the screen as well. And I think I'm handing it back to Nora now.
You are indeed. Thanks a million, David, for that really interesting presentation. Even working closely with you, I still learn something every time I see you present, and the huge amount of work that has gone into microcreds.ie over the last couple of years. Conscious of time, so like you say, maybe we could ask participants to direct questions into the chat and particularly the Q&A, and David can respond to them there. So thanks again, David, and we might now move on to the next session on the business community and society, and I'm to be joined by Mairead O'Connor and Natasha Kinsella. Hi Mairead, good to see you there. Hi Natasha, good morning.
Morning.
Allow me to very briefly introduce our two speakers for this session. So Mairead O'Connor is Skills Development Senior Manager with The Wheel, and The Wheel is the association here in Ireland for community and voluntary organisations, for charities and for social enterprises. We are really delighted to be hearing from this sector, and really happy to have The Wheel engaged in the MicroCreds Enterprise Advisory Group that we have. Another key member of the MicroCreds Enterprise Advisory Group is Natasha Kinsella, who I would describe as a VIP, a very important person here in the Dublin region, a really crucial liaison between the education and training system and enterprise when it comes in particular to skills needs. So we'll hear briefly from both speakers, about 3 or 4 minutes, and then we have plenty of time for questions. I see already a couple coming in that I think we could interestingly discuss, but please keep posting your questions in the meantime. And for now, I might hand over to Mairead to say a few words. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Nora. Yeah, delighted to be here. As Nora said, we're the National Association of Organisations across the social economy in Ireland, and the community sector or the social economy is a large and developed one in Ireland, and very involved in the skills agenda, I guess, from a number of angles. One of them is to do with the communities that we serve, the work that is done in the sector. A lot of it is involved with skills. I suppose the focus of my work is more on how the community sector accesses the skills it needs to do the work on the ground. And there are over 281,000 employees in the sector in Ireland, over 1 million volunteers, and they all have upskilling needs. And there's a great appetite for lifelong learning and upskilling amongst employers and employees in the sector. And we've got that, that's been proven through research that we have done. There are obviously barriers that mean that the workers in our sector aren't getting all of the upskilling opportunities that they need. Some of that is down to funding and the restrictions on funding in the sector, kind of using it for upskilling. But the biggest barrier that we found in our research is time. And I think borne out by David's points just a moment ago, those are the priorities that our workers would have as well, around the flexibility, the responsiveness, the accessibility. And that's one of the things that we're really happy to be working with MicroCreds on, is that accessibility, user friendliness of the MicroCreds opportunities. I suppose it's the partnership model as well that MicroCreds have put at the forefront of their approach, again, to be invited to be part of the conversations at the highest level of the project is really a great signal, I think, of the engagement with sectors like ourselves and the private sector that Natasha, I'm sure, will talk about. Indeed, MicroCreds team were at our annual conference last week, so met with over the 500 people that were attending it from across the sector. So really great to see that engagement and visibility at the biggest conversations with the sector. Our sector, I suppose, just briefly to speak again about the specific context, there's a huge pressure on staffing, recruitment and retention in the community and voluntary sector in Ireland. We have a very large number of small and micro organisations, and often workers in the sector need to specialise really quickly in areas that are outside of their qualifications, and they're responding to needs on the ground and to changes in context. And I suppose that's where, again, microcreds for us are a really good solution to those kind of emerging areas of need. So it's really valuable to be able to quickly and efficiently upskill and, with that guarantee of quality that comes with the credentialing. Again, what's really useful, and it was referred to, I think, by David as well, about the complexity of the upskilling landscape in Ireland. There's an awful lot of provision out there in various forms. So having the shared language and promotion across the 7 partner universities, that's creating this level playing field in terms of how we describe what a micro-credential is, what it does. That's really useful for us in communicating that out to our members and the wider sector. And I think finally as well, I would say that the stackability is something that is attractive to people within the sector that we've spoken to. That idea of gradually accumulating credits towards a major award is something that I think when people are looking at their own personal pathways and being able to have that flexibility is very attractive. So yeah, very much looking forward to engaging with the conversation and questions here today. That's me.
Thanks, Murray. Thanks so much for that. Yeah, we have questions coming in, but before we go to that, I'll hand over to Natasha Kinsella, please, to say a few words.
Thank you, Nora. I'm delighted to be part of this session today and give the perspective from Ireland on the employer side, I suppose, where we represent. Just to say, and thanks, Nora, for the introduction, but I'm one of 9 people around the country. So delighted to say that I represent regional skills from the 9 individuals as I sit on obviously the enterprise advisory group, but I also then feed into all the great work that David has done on the communications side. And that's the real key in terms of the awareness piece and how employers can access. But I suppose that's where the context of our role really comes in, where Regional Skills is an initiative of the Department of Further and Higher Education. And as Nora alluded to, we're very much the conduit between the educational provider side, but within the whole ecosystem and the business in addressing skills and talent needs, both at a regional level, but also feeding up at national level. And that's important from the perspective of supporting the businesses, one, to navigate that educational ecosystem, access the provisions, but also where gaps lie, to feed and inform those gaps so that the educational system can respond to business as needs arise. And I suppose that's leading me to, we have a number of stakeholders around our table. So all the state agencies, all the universities, further education, county councils, they all sit around our table at regional level to assess those particular needs. From the employer's perspective, though, and I think some of the comments have already been made by Mairead, certainly from an employer's side, to navigate that system can be quite challenging. And I suppose we take that in the context, our focus is on small, medium-sized enterprises and micro enterprises. And for those in particular, which are a prominent focus for us and our role, but also if you look at the employer landscape in Ireland, the majority are those indigenous small SME businesses. They wouldn't necessarily have the expertise in-house or time to navigate that system, or look at how they might address that in planning for talent development within their organisation. And then if you look at the labour market, it obviously in Ireland, we're at full employment almost. So it's a very tight labour market. And I think not alone is recruitment a particular challenge, but retention of the individuals that they currently have. And that leads it to, I suppose, that experience and expectation from an employer's perspective on how the system can be agile in meeting the needs through the likes of micro-credentials and offering that solution base that is easy accessible, flexible, but also stackable to support that game-changing initiative in terms of allowing their employees to constantly upskill. I think the need for that lifelong learning piece, where SMEs in particular require all employees to pivot across different roles as the pace of change and that work environment is constantly evolving. I mean, we say now at even Ireland and European level, every skill that we have almost requires some level of upskilling and reskilling, not alone between a 2-year period when you consider digitalization, but other areas, megatrends that have been mentioned, such as climate change, sustainability, transversal skills. All those require an element of constant upskilling for learners and employees within a work environment. So that's quite important. I think the thing that we remind our SMEs that we engage in with, I suppose they pay into, in Ireland, what's called the National Training Fund. So it's 1% of their labour costs within the employment base. So what we try and do through the solution, for example, the micro-credentials, it allows them to actually get that value add back so that they're paying in. This is the fund that funds these micro-credential courses. So we want to ensure, one, it meets their particular need, but actually they're availing back of that state-funded provision that they actually pay into. I think the important thing amongst the 9 regional managers as well is that we engage and share best practice, or we share intelligence and data around skills needs, both at regional and national level. So where those gaps lie, or certainly where provisions that the universities within micro-credentials are constantly evolving the offering, we inform and work very much in collaboration with the universities and our partners and stakeholders with the employer base to inform maybe where other emerging needs are coming or predicted into the future, so that we can adapt and offer that solution base. So that's quite important, I suppose. A few aspects from the employer side in terms of the experiences, which has been hugely beneficial in terms of the offering. And as Mairead said, the key thing that now is a real factor, I suppose, as to how micro-credentials has evolved, is it's delivering at a time, pace, and a cost that actually is meeting a lot of the employer needs. So long may it continue, and certainly look forward to how it evolves over time. Thank you.
That's really, really helpful. Thanks a million, Natasha, and thanks to you, Mairead, as well. We have a few minutes for questions, and I have 2 pulled out from the Q&A. One was actually directed to David, but I think the panel here might have some interesting input. It was a question on what's the gap between the number of companies and social enterprises who kind of make clear what their skill needs are versus the number of those, say, companies and social enterprises that follow through on those identified skills needs to, send their employees on a micro-credential, for example. Do we see a big gulf in between those 2 groups?
I think maybe, Mairead, if I start off just in terms of, the engagement piece, it's always a challenge, particularly when you look at micro social enterprises and small SMEs. It's always a challenge to engage, and that journey is very different depending on the size. And equally, I think we have to take account for one small micro social enterprise. They may have 1 employee, let's say, that requires some upskilling. They may not, like a large organization, have a full cohort to run a particular dedicated bespoke program for them. And I suppose that's where it comes in, where our engagement allows us to collaborate with a number of smaller SMEs who may only have 1 or 2 employees, to bring them together to really combine and collaborate together to find that solution. I think, you know, if I look at Dublin, we have well over 120,000 active businesses, predominantly SMEs in Dublin. And, you know, it's always a challenge. We're never going to necessarily reach all of those businesses at any one given time. But I think that's where, I suppose David alluded to it as well on the communications piece. It's about the awareness and access piece and the journey, and that journey can be very different at a point in time that they might need it. But what we are finding for those smaller SMEs and certainly the micro businesses who have engaged, they are a test bed to actually encourage and be an ambassador for others actually to get them to engage. So very often what's working now, and again, this is something that David has worked on from all the universities, is producing those case studies from a business perspective. It's not us always talking about it. It's the business telling the story and the benefit that they've gained by engaging in a micro-credential, as well as the employee and learner engagement and the benefit that they've brought back to the organisation through that micro-credential offering. If that helps.
That's very helpful. Thanks a million, Natasha. And I know, Marie, that's something that the Wheel does, is kind of helps your member organisations to collaborate together when accessing education and training. Isn't that right?
Yes, Nora. So we would run a funding program that would network organisations in order to meet their own training needs. And I suppose what that has shown to us is that there is a proven unmet demand there as well, and there is a huge appetite for training and upskilling. And I suppose I think one of the challenges is what Natasha has already mentioned as well, is the inaccessibility of information, or, you know, that kind of trying to find your way through that. And I suppose that's where I think one of the huge strengths of the microcreds piece, and it is borne out by David's whole presentation, is that focus on the user always. Like, what is it, the information, what is it that, rather than what the institution needs, what is it that the user here is seeking? And that focus, I think, is really the key to it. And it will need time. Microcreds is only a new, you know, it's a relatively new player, so it will take time to kind of have that I suppose awareness right across the sector, but I think it's going in the right direction, definitely, and the approach is the right one.
Nora, if I may, just to add, because I think the important thing is as well, particularly when you look at micro and SMEs, they don't know what they don't know, and sometimes for them to actually articulate what it is that they need. So, for example, if they come to us, and all 9 managers around the country conduct skills audits, it's about sitting with them to articulate what the actual need is. You know, when you take, for example, digitalization, what does that look like? And what does the solution deliver for them? Sometimes when you're talking to the owner manager, who very often, you know, is 1 in 10 of the employee base within the micro enterprise, you know, you really have to look at the granular level of, well, what does the digital upskilling requirement look like in terms of the deliverable? But what it does do through micro-credentials is that timing at a time that suits them outside of the working environment, that they can engage in that solution base. But articulating that need is where I think sometimes the employers don't realise that's where they can really engage with the university to actually talk through that. So they support the co-design piece of the micro-credential that actually really meets their particular need at the time that they need it.
Listen, thanks a million to you both for those really, really interesting and helpful perspectives. I'm conscious of time, so I've just put on display another question that I had hoped to get to, but maybe we'll get to as part of the panel discussion later on. I think it's a really interesting question in terms of that change of mindset, that change of culture from a profession-based career path and labour market to a skills-based career path and labour market. But like I say, maybe that's something we can pick up later on in the panel discussion. So thanks very much again to Mairead and to Natasha. And I think at this stage, I'm handing over to Emma for our next session.
Thanks very much, Nora. So we now move on to national policies for lifelong learning and frameworks for micro-credentials. Our next round of speakers today come again from our focus countries of both Ireland and Finland, who are going to share their insights on this really important topic. So first from Ireland, we have Nora Trench-Bowles. Nora is Head of Lifelong Learning Skills and Quality at the Irish Universities Association, followed with Pavi Busquet, who is Educational Advisor from the Ministry of Education and Culture in Finland. So both of our speakers will share the status of their national policies for micro-credentials and also incorporating lifelong learning, giving us some of the motivations behind these initiatives and the strategies and plans that have been implemented to support the development of micro-credentials in their countries. I hope we'll also hear a little of each country's vision for the future, particularly on their expectations for the continuing development of lifelong learning and micro-credentials in both countries. So I encourage our audience to engage through the Q&A function, and we will answer as many questions as we can after both presentations and in the chat function as well. So we'll start by welcoming our first speaker today on this session, my fellow IUA colleague, Nora. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Emma. You've been hearing plenty from me, but maybe just a little bit more if you'll allow me. So yes, I'm very happy to spend a few minutes kind of painting a picture, setting the scene a bit in terms of lifelong learning in Ireland. The Irish Universities Association, if we haven't said, is the representative body of the universities here in Ireland. We led the proposal development and proposal bid for the microcreds project, and we support centrally the 7 partner universities across the country who are really rolling out the microcreds project as we speak. Just making sure I can go on to the next slide. It says it's doing something great. So I think what's really important to highlight is how crucial education and educational attainment has been to Ireland's story, to our success story, at least successful in ways. Educational attainment and skills are also fundamental to the economic model of Ireland. Knowledge, skills and talent are central to Ireland's competitive advantage and place in the world. When it comes to secondary education and when it comes to higher education and tertiary educational attainment, we perform very well when looked at through an EU lens. So Ireland is the second highest in the EU for higher secondary education at 95% attainment, and we're the third highest in the EU when it comes to tertiary educational attainment at 62%. However, when it comes to lifelong learning, we do tend to lag behind. So the current figures have lifelong learning participation at 55%, which is right about the EU average. There's an EU-wide target of 60% lifelong learning participation by 2030 under the European Social Pillar, but there's quite strongly held government ambitions to not only reach that target but go beyond that. We look to countries like Finland, who we will soon be hearing from, when it comes to their high lifelong learning participation rate. I should also say one of the enablers for microcreds and for lifelong learning would be the comparatively high willingness to learn that we have here in Ireland. In terms of the employment outlook, we heard from a couple of different speakers about the situation of kind of nearing full employment, as they say. So the unemployment rate is at its lowest since the financial crash over a decade ago. I would say another enabler to lifelong learning and to microcreds would be our aging population. I think this has really kind of sharpened the minds of those in government in particular of what does it mean for up and reskilling throughout people's longer and longer careers and lives. Skills shortages very often kind of get headlines here in Ireland. They're quite a concern of employers, and I suppose skills shortages would be perceived around green skills, digital skills, STEM skills, and in particular leadership and management skills, and that's quite important for the very large SME, small and medium-sized enterprise cohort that we have here that Natasha was speaking about in the last session. Skills are increasingly important to the Irish labour market, as are, I suppose, those higher level skills. So this conversation on skills and lifelong learning is certainly not going anywhere. It's getting more and more important. And so there has been quite a strong sharpening, I suppose, of national policy focus on lifelong learning. This very often is a conversation that is had through the prism of skills. And I suppose here in Ireland, we have had a national skills strategy since 2016. That strategy established what I call a national skills architecture, a national skills council, which is an advisory group made up of government departments, state agency representatives, and crucially employer representatives too. There's also the regional skills fora, which we heard about from Natasha. So these fora are around the country, linking, like we said, enterprise with the education and training system. We also have a number of bodies which we get kind of skills, evidence-based skills data from, including the expert group on future skills needs, which forecasts kind of skills needs numbers. And we also have the skills and labour market unit, which produces quarterly and yearly reports on skills needs right across the labour market. Over the last couple of years, we had a very active OECD skills review. This is something that the OECD has done in a number of countries and was commissioned by our then Minister of Higher Education, now Prime Minister, to carry out in Ireland. I have here on the screen the 4 key priorities that came out of that review, and I suppose the first 2 there would have specific references to microcredentials, be it through needing to secure a balance in skills and being responsive to that, and in fostering greater participation in lifelong learning. My final slide talks a bit about funding, but I suppose there is a wider conversation about some of the enablers and some of the barriers. So I suppose one of the barriers, as I would see it, is the fact that lifelong learning and microcreds aren't funded from core higher education funding, and I describe this as a barrier because I think that there are consequences from having a separate parallel pot of money to fund lifelong learning. It's seen as, I suppose, separate from some of the other activity happening across higher education in particular. I think that has consequences too for systems and for data capture, which are very often built on the core funding model. However, we are very grateful to have funding for lifelong learning and for microcreds and for upskilling more generally. And this tends to come from the National Training Fund, which Natasha mentioned in the previous session. This is a levy that is placed on employers, which goes into a fund specifically targeted at up and reskilling. The Human Capital Initiative, which funds the microcreds project, that comes from the National Training Fund, and the learner subsidy fee that we heard from David, which is live at the moment, that comes from the National Training Fund, and some other up and reskilling programs that we have, such as Springboard, such as SkillNet activity. Those come from the National Training Fund too, and I suppose we would advocate very strongly for the continuing spend of the National Training Fund, and for that to kind of build on the close collaboration that we see between enterprise and community partners with the higher education sector. So, conscious of time, I might leave that there for now and hand back to Emma.
That's great. Thank you very much, Nora, for your talk. Well, Nora, we have some questions in the chat from Jarinka. How do you intend to secure that the quality of stackable qualifications will be comparable to the quality of the more traditional offerings?
Thanks very much for that question. Certainly through the microcreds project and across the 7 partner universities who are participating in microcreds, there has been quite a long process of trying to understand how the microcreds can go through the institutional quality assurance processes. So there's been quite a lot of work to see not only how can microcreds be embedded into those institutional quality assurance processes, but also then how those processes need to be made more flexible to meet the needs of microcreds. So I suppose that looks slightly different in each of the partner universities, depending on their processes, but that was certainly part of the conversation of the project right from the very beginning, that there does need to be that kind of strong quality assurance behind all of the microcred offerings.
Thanks, Nora. We might pick up on 1 or 2 more of the questions with Nora in the meantime. And I think there's some interesting questions coming through, I think particularly coming from the RPL direction. From Diego, can a person that has learned on their own or through a traditional degree validate the knowledge they already have as a micro-credential without following a course?
That's an interesting question, and I think it's kind of interesting timing in the Irish context. So, as part of this human capital initiative fund that we have been speaking about, there was a competitive call for proposals. So the microcreds project across the 7 partner universities was one of the successful projects under that call, and one of the other successful projects is a national higher education recognition of prior learning project. So this spans not only the IUA member universities, but right across the public higher education system here in Ireland. And I suppose what that RPL, and it's called different things in different contexts, and sometimes it's called VPL, validation of prior learning. What that project is looking specifically at is, I suppose, the recognition, the validation of experiential learning. So the learning that we do in our workplace, in our homes, volunteering in local sports clubs. How can we bring that learning to a higher education context, and how can that be recognized either for entry to a program where someone might not meet the traditional academic entry requirements, or indeed for exemptions in a particular program. And I suppose the RPL project and the microcreds project have collaborated right from the very beginning. So it has been made explicit in all of the entry requirements to all of the microcreds offerings, the availability of recognition of prior learning for entry. And we know that that is something that is kind of very frequently taken up. Very often the learners who are going for the microcredentials have prior learning that they would like to, bring with them and have recognized as part of their learning journey. So we see quite a lot of links between those two fields.
We might just pick up, I suppose, just on the link between microcredentials and RPL. As part of the microcreds project, we do ask our institutions, are you aware of learners using RPL as an entry mechanism? And it is something we are definitely seeing. And I suppose it's the links between the two are there, they're evident. And RPL is obviously an entry mechanism for many other types of courses as well. But it is interesting to see that there's interest from employers as well, using RPL as an entry mechanism, particularly for cohorts or workforces that may have non-formal learning and experience as well. And it's a way to recognise that and use that as an entry mechanism. So Nora, are you aware of any examples where that's happened in practice in the Irish examples?
I think there are plenty of examples to point to, and perhaps it's something that we could maybe ask Mags from UCC about as part of the panel discussion. I'm sure Mags has an example from her university, but like you say, Emma, I suppose RPL can be used as a tool, as an offering in higher education and enterprise collaboration, much like microcreds can too. So I suppose they can be seen as part of a suite of ways in which higher education and social partners and enterprise can collaborate.
Thanks, Nora. I'll just pick up one more maybe before we'll go back and check our technical issues. Is it already possible, or will it be possible, to stack credits from different institutions?
Great question, Emma. I mean, as you might imagine, this is quite a live discussion at the moment. I would say it's a work in progress, at least in the Irish context. We have a working group looking specifically at this, I should say, the remit of the working group is not only to look at stackability in terms of micro-credentials, but to take a slightly wider view of credit accumulation and portability right across the higher education offering. And I suppose that is being looked at kind of within institutions, across the Irish universities, and with a view to European mobility too. I think we're well served here in Ireland by having a very well embedded and very well functioning ECTS system, and a kind of very well known, very well used and quite flexible national framework of qualification. So I do think that those kind of Bologna tools being so well embedded in the Irish higher education system really does serve us well when it comes to questions like these.
That's great. Thank you, Nora.
Now, as the last thing for this webinar, I see some people have had to leave. 2 hours is quite a long webinar, but we still have a final panel where I will ask some questions to each of the participants. So I asked them all to come up on the screen. While I have started, yes, so I will start with Emma and then with Mered and Natasha. So really kind of go back to the very, very basic question. So you've talked a little bit about why micro-credentials, but how do you see really their role, and what do you think their role could or should be in the future in your own system? So I will ask first this question to Emma, please.
Thanks for the question, Maria. I suppose micro-credentials, they're significant in the spectrum of awards because they offer a flexible and it's really targeted way to recognise specific skills and competencies. They are a way to address our rapidly evolving labour market here in Ireland and similarly across all the wider European member states as well. In Ireland, from my perspective, they complement traditional qualifications by providing these shorter, more focused learning opportunities that are more in sync with today's modern workforce. This sense of not only lifelong learning, but career-wide learning for people. So our national framework that we have developed and implemented through the MicroCredits project has allowed our partner universities to achieve a consensus and a strong mutual understanding of what we know a micro-credential to be in the higher education context. And for us, this has proved instrumental in our partner universities developing them as part of their learning portfolios and by association with the wider learner and employer awareness work that we do as well, which I think is really vital for longer term acceptance and sustainability as well.
Thank you. Natasha and Mered, for you, how do you see really, what would be your wish list? How do you see, what should be ideally, the role of micro-credentials in support of the societal and labour market needs? Natasha, you can go first.
Perfect. Thank you, Maria. All of the things obviously Emma just alluded to, but to add to that, I think, SMEs are a prime focus here in Ireland. They are a prominent base and that won't change. If anything, I suppose, as things progress on, while micro-credentials at the moment, it's relatively new. I think the appetite for employers, particularly SMEs, is hugely growing. But I think the stackable piece to support their talent management systems, particularly when you talk about SMEs who maybe don't have an expertise in-house, that they will look to that system delivering that talent management pipeline capability and resource for the employer base as we continue to move into a tight labour market. But then looking at the employee base, I think gone are those days, I think it's been alluded to in other sessions, that when you enter the labour market, that notion that you're going to stay in one particular role for your life cycle is just gone. You constantly have to pivot and there's opportunities to change. We saw that over COVID times, that people are transitioning and changing from one sector to another. Micro-credentials allow that opportunity to keep constantly upskilling, but it's not linear. It's at any given life cycle or any given role that you have.
Great, thanks, Merit.
Thanks, Maria. Yes, I mean, I echo what Natasha and Emma have said. I suppose from our point of view, one of the primary benefits of it is that it is the partnership model being used and at the forefront. So for us, it's a really great way to guide organizations in our sector into partnership with the universities. And it's a proof of concept that that partnership approach works. And I think that's what we'd really like to see, it building on that and more co-created solutions to the skill needs that are out there within the sector. I think the accessibility piece as well, and the recognition of prior learning that was referenced in the last in the last session, I think that's hugely beneficial from a community perspective. Within organizations in the community sector, but with the communities that we work with, and thinking about that wider lifelong learning agenda in Ireland. The micro-credentials offer pathways into higher education for people who may never have approached higher education before. So, any way that we can reduce those barriers and ease that accessibility. And I think micro-credentials is, just another really efficient way of doing that. So those are two pieces I'd add.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have in the meantime found out that Päivi has found her voice, so we're very happy about that. So we'll get to Päivi in just a couple of minutes. But before I go, just to take advantage of this panel setting, while I don't go through all the questions now so that we can hear from Päivi as well, I do have a little question to which I would like to have a brief response from Minna and from Max. Micro-credentials, of course, the name tells us it's shorter. But is there some kind of pedagogical or structural difference? What makes micro-credential a credential or a micro, other than the length? So what is very specific for them that they should, in your opinion, let's say, cover or be about? So Max, do you want to go first?
One of the things that we look at in particular when we're designing, especially any co-design micro-credentials, is the structure and the layout of the micro-credential. Things like a rest week in the middle of the micro-credential to allow the workplace learner to catch up should they have missed any sessions. Also the focus on authentic assessment, that the assessment matches a real need and allows you to do something that gives you that work-ready skill. Mm-hmm. So a less focus on knowledge acquisition, but in terms of how can you take that back to your workplace or into your career and use it straight away.
Excellent. Minna.
Yes, thank you, Maria. Well, what comes to pedagogics, I think the micro-credentials should be as learner-centered as possible. The learner profile is very different from the traditional university students' profile. So I think that's a key issue. And then I think I earlier mentioned already counseling, because the students who come in, whether they are business professionals or from the more marginalized groups, for instance, unemployed, they really need support for their studies, and they need to see the kind of a path that is suitable for them. So I would take like pedagogics and counseling as two major aspects up.
That's very interesting, because not all learners are equal. I think that's the bottom line, and you need to know your learners to be able to then support them. Thank you very much. So I would like to ask a question to Nora, which is about how have micro-credentials induced or promoted change in your system? And on the other hand, what things will still need to be changed for really reap the benefits from micro-credentials?
Thanks, Maria, for that. I think what micro-creds and micro-credentials have done is kind of sharpen the mind and maybe sharpen the eye on the range of lifelong learning activity that's happening across our universities. So like I kind of alluded to in my presentation, it has very often been seen as kind of something over there. And I think what microcreds has helped to do is to really sharpen the focus on lifelong learning, of which, you know, micro-credentials is one of the offerings, but it's been a helpful way to kind of funnel concentration, should we say. In terms of some of the barriers that I think remain, again, I alluded to it in my presentation, but I think the fact that our systems, be them on a national, sectoral or institutional level, are very much based on that traditional full-time undergraduate student. That is a significant problem that requires significant work and significant change. Until that happens, I think it will continue to be a bit of a struggle, a bit of a challenge to find those flexibilities in the systems where we can.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nora. Now, for the last couple of minutes, I will just ask each one of you to think, what is the future for micro-credentials in your system or in Europe or in the world? But perhaps you can focus on your system a little bit. But just with like one sentence, we've seen MOOCs, they were to become the only form of higher education a few years ago. There's where I talked about that didn't really happen. So are micro-credential another rising star, that then a trend that goes away quickly? Will in future all education be set in micro-credentials, or maybe the truth lies in between these two extremes? So what is your take on the future of micro-credentials? And I start with David, please.
No pressure at all to start off. I think from my perspective, I definitely see a growing interest in micro-credentials here in Ireland. I think we need to do more work to mainstream them as a automatic offering that people think of when they think of formal education here. I think we're doing good work at the kind of foundation blocks of that, but I think as a sector, we need to look at that and how we can kind of mainstream it both in our universities and as higher education in Ireland. I think that'll be my goal for it.
Thank you. Minna, followed by Päivi, if she can.
Yes, I think they are here to stay. And I think they will partly, to some extent, replace degree education. But maybe just very shortly, in Finland, as you know, degree education is tuition free of charge. So here we have the problem that people take another degree as complementary education. So we hope that these micro-credentials will, in a sense, replace the second degree,
yes, okay,
which would be like much wiser also from a national point of view.
Excellent. Thank you. Päivi.
So let's try again. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are there.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Thank you. I think Minna about said it, but I think what we need to do is to teach the economic life, the working life, that if they want to have upskilling, reskilling possibilities that are really quality assured, that are presented by the higher education institutions, they have to learn to pay for it, for the education, because since it's tuition free in Finland, I think that the economic life is using the education that is leading to a degree as an upskilling education. Right. So like this is like really the threshold now that we are really struggling and working with, but hopefully we get there one day, and thanks to the universities, I am sure that we will able to do that. Thank you.
Päivi.
Finally hear me. Perfect.
Yes.
The
last minute, but that's very good. Now I know Minna needs to leave maybe now, so we say bye to Minna, and then very quickly, just really one sentence, Maired, and followed by Natasha, please.
One sentence, I think, again, I would return to the partnership piece, that it's a huge opportunity for real partnership between the community and voluntary sector and higher education. And I think hopefully we can build on that for further engagement as well. But yeah, that's the piece that I would focus on.
Thank you, Maria. I think for SMEs in particular, I think it is that stealing David's tagline, the game changer for SMEs in terms of helping and supporting them with talent management development, the go-to place through microcreds. It's here to stay.
Yeah, good. Max, what do you add to that?
I do think that micro-credentials can offer that flexible learning piece, real true accredited learning that allows us to meet a very current need. And I don't think we should replace what can come from a 4-year undergraduate degree. I know for myself, when I was doing my undergraduate degree, there were so many things I learned during those 4 years that weren't on the curriculum. So we need to keep that for our students, but it's flexible learning for now and your true lifelong learning.
Thank you. Very briefly, Nora, followed by Emma, has the last word.
Thank you. Yes, I think they're here to stay, and I think microcreds will always be complementary to some of the more traditional university offerings. I think the future of microcredentials is an enabler to really get serious about lifelong learning, including the university's contribution to lifelong learning, and like Mag said, getting serious about flexible delivery and flexible offerings.
Thank you, Emma.
Thanks, Maria. I suppose from my perspective, I think micro-credentials are here to stay, and we will see this continuing evolution and progression. They're agile, they're cost-effective for learners, for employers, and for institutions themselves, and it's a way to meet this growing need for this flexible and targeted learning in our modern world.
Thank you. Spot on time, I think, and on a positive note, this will continue. We'll have to watch the space and make the most out of them. So I would like to very, very quickly, I'm being told that it's very important to finish on time. So I thank very much all the speakers. Apologies again to Päivi and to the participants for the technical issues. Thank you for joining in any case. And to all the participants, we had the peak of over 350 participants, which is shows that this really is an important topic. And we will continue discussing and working together and sharing experiences on this. So have a very nice afternoon, all of you. And until the next time then. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.